good start for our team, good start for our defense. Good to see our young guys get out and play as hard as they did. They gave tremendous effort, and it was really a good thing to see, to be able to evaluate and get a feel for where they are and what we need to do from a depth standpoint. So it was really encouraging to watch the way they flew around and to see some guys make some plays.
Speaking of plays, obviously, big debut for Greg Rousseau. Mm-hmm. Where are you at in your approach to coaching him? Because he's had such a good camp, comes out, has a good game, but obviously probably telling him that there's a long way to go.
Yeah, that's probably the way you approach it, Matt. We still have quite a bit of football ahead of us, and we're watching his maturation and just seeing how he processes. And even after having a really good start in his first preseason game, first NFL game, you want to see how he progresses in practice following that and what happens in the next ball game. So it's all a part of the evaluation.
Leslie, you've got an extraordinary number of ends with position flexibility, and I know you're always trying to find the right combinations, and it may vary from week to week, but maybe just speak to the challenge from a coaching perspective when you have so many. It's a good dilemma to have, but trying to mix and match when you have so many guys with position flexibility.
Yeah, Chris, you're right. It's a good problem to have. I mean, you much rather be in this situation, and don't really view it as a problem. We just got to be able to take a look at things in practice as well as some of the games we have ahead of us in this preseason and just try to determine, what's the best use of each guy's skill set. And it really is something we look forward to. And I think Eric Washington, along with Jacques Césaire, they're doing a really good job of putting the guys in different situations, each one of our defensive ends, so we can kind of get a better feel for what their strengths and weaknesses are and what they will be. And that gives us some opportunities going forward. But, we still have some time to be able to play with some things and take a look. So we'll continue the evaluation.
Just to follow up on that, how much of the evaluation is finding maybe these two guys work exceptionally well together? Like, how much of that goes into those decisions?
That's a big part of it, and that's something we talked at length about following the game when we had our personnel meeting. Which two or three do we think work best together? Because some of those guys can slip inside, as you know, because of the position flexibility. So we're still going through that, but that is a part of it, yes.
How do you feel Starla Tula is looking? He didn't play in the game and hasn't played in the game in over a year. Where do you feel he is to be ready to play in game action and be the star that he was before the year off?
Yeah. John, some of why he didn't play in that ball game is some of the good things we've seen in practice. That was enough that we've seen to tell us it wasn't necessary to put him out there in that ball game, that we could wait another week and continue to evaluate some of the other players we wanted to be able to see. So he's had a really good camp. We were all wondering what it would be like when we got him back. And boy, he's been a bright light for us in a lot of ways. So we still got some work ahead of us. He'll get a chance to get some work this week and maybe in the third preseason game as well. But up to this point, he's been a big boost to our defensive line.
Leslie, what can you say about Demar Hamlin so far, how he came through the first game and just really his whole summer? Can you kind of give us an update on what's up with him?
Yeah, he's continuing to grow like a lot of rookies at this point. There's some ups and downs in some of the things that he does, but there are a lot more positives than there are negatives. And he's still learning, still getting the feel for the pro game. And, obviously Friday night was his first chance to get the speed of what a game would be like, and that's going to be so different than a regular season game. But I thought he held his own really well. Still some things that we want to get cleaned up. But that's just a part of the process as he continues to develop and grow. But up to this point, we're pleased with the progress he's made. We've got to keep putting him in different situations and see how he responds.
Are you closer today than you were before the preseason game on figuring out that number 2 cornerback spot?
We still have more views that we need, and I think this game against Chicago will help us with that. We feel really good about where Dane is. We feel good about where Levi is, and we still want to make sure we have good quality depth at that corner spot. But Levi's had a terrific camp. Dane's done some good things as well, but we need to continue this process.
I asked Sean yesterday, he said it was a bit of a deeper question to get into it another time, but I am curious from your standpoint. You've been in this league for
almost 40 years, has defensive football evolved almost into positionless football? It's more about players than positions now, how you can move people, and really it's the player. It's not really putting him in a box.
I think you're on to something there, Sal. I'll take you back a few years. When we were looking at Micah Hyde and watching his tape at Green Bay and trying to determine what his fit would be for us, and we thought about some of the guys that Sean and I had worked with in Philadelphia and how Brian Dawkins was kind of what you described. He was kind of ahead of his time. He wasn't a box safety per se. We did so many things with him. He was really the straw that kind of stirred the drink for our defense in Philadelphia. But he was almost a positionless player. He could play in the slot. He could play out at corner if we needed him to. He could obviously play deep in the middle. He could blitz. And, he's a Hall of Famer. But when we were looking at Micah, we saw a lot of the similar traits, a lot of position flexibility. And as we've put our secondary together, we've tried to, and even with our linebackers, Matt Milano, we've tried to find guys that don't necessarily fit a position, but they give you a lot of flexibility to do different things with, much like, what we were talking about, Chris, with our defensive ends, the flexibility to go inside and outside. So to answer your question, I think that is the way the game is going, where you don't pigeonhole a guy and say he's a strong safety or he's a will linebacker or he can only play the nickel position. So the more guys you can find who have the flexibility to play different positions, the better for your defense. It really creates problems for offenses.
And there are more guys like that now. That's the difference, right? Because it used to be maybe Brian or Mike a few years ago, but now it seems like there's just more guys like that.
It seems that way. It's probably something to do with what's happening in college football, but it seems to be that way. I know that's kind of how we approach the draft, looking for guys like that, and there does seem to be a few more out there.
Where is Darryl Johnson's development now compared to where maybe you projected it to be at this point when you drafted him a few years ago?
I think he's come along at a good pace, John. He's, and Heath Farwell, our special teams coach, can address this, but he's one of our core guys on special teams, which is really important. And he's a rare guy to have a defensive end that you see sprint down on kickoffs and blowing people up the way he does. And as a defensive end, he's been a little hamstrung not having an off season a year ago. Had his rookie season. Most guys, there's a transition from college football to pro football and went through that, but then not having an off season a year ago was tough for him. But this year he really seems to be on course. We like where he is and just got to keep giving him opportunities. But we're pleased with Darrell's progress.
A lot of people, when you drafted Greg and Boogie, looked at Mario and Jerry as the older people that maybe it would affect. What's been your message to Darrell, a younger guy that even fits the same physical stature as Greg, seeing people like that and even FA coming in here at this junction of his career?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've tried to encourage Darrell from the day that Greg and even before he and Carlos were drafted. When I see him in practice, and I told him this yesterday, every day you walk out here, man, you come out here with a chip on your shoulder. You show everybody that you deserve to be here, and you're fighting for a spot on this team. It's nothing different than what I told him when we drafted him out of A&T. He has to come out with that attitude and that approach every day as a game day for him. And he's practiced that way, and he's held his own and done a really good job, each year.
Leslie, Andre Smith obviously stood out the other night, did a little bit of everything for you. Yeah. You guys re-signed him in the offseason. What did you base that on from what you saw? Because he didn't see a whole lot of playing time last year. What made you guys think that this is a guy worth re-signing, and then just kind of fast forward to what he did Friday night?
Yeah, with Andre, it's about his not only what he does on defense, but special teams as well. He's one of our core guys, similar to what I mentioned with Darrell, who when you're a backup linebacker, you need to be good on special teams, and he is. He's one of our top guys, and that phase of the game, as we all know, is so important. And your linebackers and your secondary and a lot of your defenders are the guys that make your special teams really good. And Andre is one of those guys, and that's kind of what really piqued our interest, his production on special teams, but also his flexibility, which you saw on display in our preseason game, being able to play a little bit inside, play a little bit outside, good on third down. A guy who got in the game against New England a year ago when we had injuries and played really well for us. So, he's a guy you feel good about. If we get injuries, he can step in and play.
Leslie, another player on the linebacker group with Miles Harris. He's had a quietly nice camp and made some plays in that first preseason game. How does he fit into the mix of that group?
Yeah, I really like the way, Maddie, that Joe has been moving around. I mean, he's going back to OTAs. He's done a good job for us with his command of the huddle. He did a really good job with his operation on Friday night when things got a little hectic at times. We had some moments where we didn't have the coach-to-player communicator and it wasn't working, so we had to, make do. Had to go back to old school and signal and get some information to him, and he handled it, great pause. And but that's the veteran that's in him. This is not his first training camp. He has some experience, and he plays and acts that way in practice. So pleased with what he does, and hopefully he'll do well again on Friday night or Saturday when we play.
You've had a few weeks now to really evaluate FA. When you got him, and now that you've had a chance to work with him a little bit, I'm sure you talked to Eric Washington before you brought him in, and then when you did about his story and everything like that. What have been your impressions of his ability to digest the playbook? Because what I've heard is he's really come a long way in that department, and he's really got a high football IQ.
He does have a high football IQ, and I'm sure, Matt, you're probably familiar with his background. It's not an extensive football background, coming from London and really where soccer is the premier sport. And for him to have picked up football and to get to where he is today, it's impressive. And he puts a lot of time into it. I mean, he studies, he spends time before and after practice, and the fact that Eric had familiarity with him really helped us. I mean, he kind of educated us on FA and what his potential would be, and he hasn't disappointed. He's done a really good job for us, and he's one of those guys that gives us some flexibility, being able to play inside and outside, and just want to see him continue to develop as we go along. He did a good job for us Friday night. His energy level is high. I mean, he plays hard every single down, and that's good for the rest of our players to be able to see a veteran player working like that. So just like some of the things he's doing.
On Greg's sack, Harrison had a really good bull rush,
yes, he did.
Actually, right next to him, helped cause that. For seeing that from Harrison, knowing the kind of player he is and knowing you're getting that penetration, what does that do for your defense?
It was really good. I mean, anytime you can get an inside push, I mean, it helps our defensive ends, and you're right, that helped Greg in that situation, and we need that. We need that inside push, and we'll get that, having Star back. We need that from Ed as well, and it was great to see it from Harry, and Harry had a good game. He did some good things in that ball game, and but that helps our defensive ends when you can get that interior push.
What stands out to you about Levi? Obviously, his familiarity with the defense, but just he's a guy that kind of has been talked about trying to hold on to his role in the team.
Yeah. It seems every year we're talking through that about this time of the year, and he continues to prevail. And he made a play in that ball game on Friday night in the end zone. That was a heck of a play now. I mean, that was a really good throw by the quarterback, a place where you would think only the receiver is going to have a chance to make this play. And somehow Levi times it up, gets his hand on the ball, and he's done that for us. He's been a guy, when the pressure's on, he's made some plays for us. So his attitude has been terrific. We have a lot of confidence in him, and he's battling. He and Dane both are battling for the spot, and we'll see how it all plays out.
Leslie, the league has made a new emphasis this year on trying to cut down on the taunting rule or taunting in the game. As someone who can understand it from a player's point of view, how difficult is that, or how difficult an adjustment is that going to be this year?
I think this time of the year it'll be a little bit of an adjustment, but I'm believing that by the time we get to the season, guys will have made that adjustment, because I'm sure the officials are going to enforce it here in the preseasons and make us well aware that it's going to cost us if somebody's taunting. And I think it's good for the game that you really keep this under control. It's not necessary to stand over a guy and say things to him or point at him or whatever. It doesn't need to be in the game. I mean, that's not necessary for you to be able to play well. So I think it's a good thing, and hopefully by the time we get to the regular season, it's less and less of what it was in the past.
Leslie, what have you seen from Josh Thomas's trajectory from when you first got him to where he is right now?
I was telling Josh, we were walking off the field yesterday, I had been teasing him throughout the off season without pads on. I kept telling him, I said, Josh, you're flying around here in practice, but when we get pads on, you're going to disappear in your first live action. And man, did he prove me wrong. And I'm glad he did. I said, because I was telling him, I said, you're not going to hit nobody, Josh. And so when we were walking off the field yesterday, and even in our meetings, I just congratulated him. He did a heck of a job in the ball game. tackled well, flew around, was in the right spot, did a great job of communicating. A guy who, like all of our rookies a year ago, had no off season, and you're kind of like hoping, and you really don't know. But this off season, we've had a chance to spend time with him and watch him develop, and he's come a long way from a year ago, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that he's been able to practice and go through some things, but was really impressed with what he did on Friday night. All right, thank you guys.